Entrepreneurship isn't difficult because the work is hard. Hard work is predictable. You lift the weight, you get stronger. You study the material, you pass the test. Entrepreneurship is difficult because you can work all day, give everything you have, and still have nothing happen, no signal, no feedback, no confirmation that you're even moving in the right direction. You wake up, you push, you spend time, money, energy, and effort, and at the end of the day, the scoreboard hasn't changed. And then you're expected to wake up tomorrow and do it again with the same intensity, the same belief, without knowing if today mattered at all. Most people think the pain of entrepreneurship is failure. It's not. Failure at least gives you a Mansoor. The real pain is uncertainty. Not knowing if the thing you're building will work. Not knowing if the sacrifice you're making right now will ever pay you back. Not knowing when it's supposed to click. There's no finish line, no clear distance. No one tells you how long to run. They just say, run. And you don't get to stop when it hurts because it's going to hurt the entire time. And that's why most people never really start. They talk about ideas. They talk about goals. They talk about scaling and freedom in the life they want because talking feels productive without being painful. Doing is lonely. Doing is frustrating. Doing means accepting that for a long time you're going to look wrong, feel lost, and still keep moving forward anyway. This is what makes entrepreneurship so difficult, and also why so few people ever make it through. Most people are conditioned to believe that effort produces results in a short, visible window. You study, you get a grade, you work overtime, you get paid. You go to the gym, your body changes. Entrepreneurship breaks this mental contract immediately. You can put in long hours, make sacrifices, do everything right, and still see nothing move. No sales, no traction, no proof that the work mattered. That disconnect between effort and outcome is what makes entrepreneurship uniquely difficult because it attacks the way the human brain is wired to stay motivated. The brain runs on feedback loops. When there is a clear signal that says, this worked, motivation increases. When there is no signal, the brain interprets that absence as failure, even when progress is happening invisibly. In entrepreneurship, most progress is invisible for a long time. Systems are being built, skills are being developed, mistakes are being made quietly, and none of it shows up as a win. From the outside and often from the inside, it looks like stagnation. This creates emotional friction because the entrepreneur is forced to continue investing resources without confirmation that the investment is sound. What makes this harder is that learning in entrepreneurship is not linear. You don't follow a checklist and arrive at certainty, you wander. You test, you guess. You try things that don't work and often don't even tell you why they didn't work. If you already knew how to solve the problem, it wouldn't be a problem. The act of figuring it out requires moving forward without clarity, which feels inefficient and uncomfortable to people who are used to structured progress. Days pass where the only outcome is realizing what not to do, and the mind struggles to accept that as progress. This is why entrepreneurship feels slow even when it isn't. The work compounds silently, the skills stack quietly, judgment improves without applause. Meanwhile, bills still exist, time keeps passing, and doubt grows louder. The entrepreneur isn't just doing the work, they are also managing the psychological weight of not knowing whether today's effort will pay off tomorrow, next year, or ever. Every decision carries opportunity cost, and every delay feels like proof that something is wrong. Most people quit here, not because they are incapable, but because they interpret the absence of immediate results as a signal to stop. They mistake uncertainty for incompetence. They assume discomfort means misalignment rather than growth. The few who continue are not necessarily smarter or more talented, they are simply willing to keep showing up without reassurance. To keep working when the scoreboard is blank, to tolerate the emotional discomfort of effort without evidence, and to trust that momentum often appears only after long periods where nothing seems to move. Uncertainty is the core tax of entrepreneurship, and most people are not trained to pay it. From an early age, life is structured to minimize unknowns. You are given instructions, timelines, rules, and grading systems. You are told what success looks like and when you will know you have achieved it. Entrepreneurship removes all of that at once. There is no syllabus, no timeline, and no guarantee that the path you are on leads anywhere. The discomfort doesn't come from working hard. It comes from not knowing whether the work is correct, necessary, or even rational. The human nervous system is designed to avoid prolonged uncertainty. When outcomes are unclear, the brain interprets the situation as a threat. Stress increases, focus narrows, and emotional decision-making takes over. In entrepreneurship, this state can last for months or years. You are constantly making bets with incomplete information. You choose a market without knowing if it will respond. You spend money without knowing if it will return. You invest time into skills without knowing if they will ever be monetized. Each decision stacks another layer of uncertainty, and the weight compounds. What makes this especially painful is that uncertainty does not fade with effort. In most jobs, effort reduces anxiety because it moves you closer to a known result. In entrepreneurship, effort often increases anxiety because each action reveals how much you still don't know. The more you learn, the more variables appear. New problems replace old ones. This creates the feeling of running without a finish line. You are told to keep going. No one can tell you how far, how long, or what done even looks like. This is where many people psychologically break. They begin searching for certainty instead of progress. They overconsume content, ask for, constantly pivot, not because the strategy is wrong, but because uncertainty is unbearable. Talking about goals feels safer than executing them. Planning feels productive because it creates the illusion of control. Execution strips that illusion away and forces direct contact with the unknown. Every action becomes a question mark rather than a confirmation. The entrepreneurs who endure are not fearless, they simply learn to coexist with uncertainty. They stop waiting for clarity and start moving with incomplete confidence. They accept that doubt does not mean danger, confusion does not mean failure. They understand that the pain is not a signal to stop but a cost of entry. Over time, their tolerance increases. The uncertainty doesn't disappear, but it becomes familiar, and familiarity turns what once felt unbearable into something manageable, allowing them to keep making decisions, taking action, and moving forward even when the outcome remains unclear. Entrepreneurship becomes especially difficult because there is no defined endpoint, and the absence of a finish line creates a unique kind of psychological pressure. In most challenges, pain is tolerable because it is measurable. You can endure discomfort when you know how long it will last. You can push harder when you know where the end is. Entrepreneurship removes that anchor completely. You are not told how many days, months, or years it will take. You are not told when it will finally make sense. You are simply told to keep going, and that open-ended demand is what drains people long before effort ever does. The mind constantly asks one question when under stress: how long will this last? Where there is no answer, stress multiplies. Every setback feels heavier because it could be temporary or permanent. Every delay feels dangerous because there is no external signal confirming you're still on the right path. This is why entrepreneurship feels mentally exhausting even when the workload itself is manageable. You are not just working, you are carrying the uncertainty of duration, and the brain treats indefinite pain as far worse than intense but time-bound pain. This is why many people hesitate to fully commit. Starting an entrepreneurial path feels like stepping onto a treadmill that might never stop. Once you begin, there is no guaranteed moment where someone taps you on the shoulder and says you've earned rest. That thought alone is enough to spike anxiety. The idea of endless effort without a promised payoff feels unfair, risky, and unsafe. So instead of starting, people delay. They prepare, they research, they talk, they convince themselves they are being strategic, when in reality they are avoiding the discomfort of an undefined journey. Talking about goals becomes a substitute for progress. It provides emotional reward without emotional risk. You get recognition, validation, and a sense of identity without exposing yourself to failure or uncertainty. Execution offers none of that early on. Execution is quiet. It is lonely. It often looks unimpressive from the outside and feels discouraging on the inside. There is no applause for trying, no reassurance for persistence, and no visible milestone to confirm you are closer than yesterday. This gap between talking and doing is where many people stay stuck. They confuse intention with action and clarity with safety. But entrepreneurship does not reward clarity. It rewards movement. The people who eventually succeed are not the ones who felt ready or certain. They are the ones who accepted that the race had no visible end and decided to run anyway. They stopped asking how long and started asking what they could do next. By releasing the need for a finish line, they freed themselves from the mental trap that keeps most people standing at the start, watching others move forward while telling themselves they will begin once it feels safer. Entrepreneurship exposes a brutal imbalance between what people say they want and what they are willing to endure to get it. Most people genuinely want freedom, money, autonomy, and control over their time, but they underestimate the emotional cost required before any of those rewards show up. The gap between desire and tolerance is where ambition quietly dies. It's not dramatic. There's no big failure moment. It happens slowly through avoidance, delay, and substitution of real action with safer behaviors that feel productive but carry no real risk. One of the most common substitutes is talking. Talking about ideas, talking about scaling, vision, and future success. These conversations provide dopamine without danger. You get to feel ambitious without being exposed. You get validation without vulnerability. You get identity without execution. In contrast, doing the work strips away comfort. It forces confrontation with incompetence, uncertainty, and the possibility of being wrong. Most people unconsciously choose the former because it protects their self-image. Entrepreneurship doesn't just test skill, it tests ego. When progress is slow or invisible, the mind looks for ways to preserve a sense of worth. Talking about plans allows someone to feel intelligent and forward, thinking even if nothing is actually happening. Planning feels controlled, execution feels chaotic. Planning keeps failure hypothetical. Execution makes failure personal. This is why many people stay stuck in preparation mode far longer than necessary. They convince themselves they are being patient or strategic, when in reality they are protecting themselves from discomfort. The irony is that the same uncertainty that creates fear is also what creates opportunity. If the path were obvious, everyone would take it. If the rewards were guaranteed, they would be smaller. Entrepreneurship pays a premium precisely because most people cannot tolerate the emotional experience required to reach the payoff. The frustration, the doubt, the repeated moments of feeling lost are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that the barrier is working as intended, filtering out those unwilling to endure it. This is why entrepreneurship feels lonely. The work is done without applause. The effort is invisible. Friends and family may not understand why progress seems slow or why certainty never arrives. From the outside, it can look like stagnation. From the inside, it feels like constant friction. Many people quit not because they fail, but because they get tired of feeling uncomfortable without recognition. They choose short-term emotional relief over long-term structural change. Those who persist make a quiet shift. They stop needing to talk about what they are building. They stop chasing validation. They accept that discomfort is not a problem to solve, but a condition to operate within. They measure progress internally rather than socially. They understand that entrepreneurship rewards those who can act without applause, work without reassurance, and continue without clarity, while others remain stuck explaining what they plan to do someday. They are busy doing the unglamorous work today, knowing that results often arrive long after the need to talk about them has disappeared. At a certain point, entrepreneurship stops being about strategy and becomes about identity. The longer someone stays in the process, the more it forces a confrontation with who they are when no one is watching and nothing is working yet. There are long stretches where effort goes unnoticed. Progress feels imaginary and external validation is completely absent. In those moments, the only thing sustaining forward motion is an internal commitment that is not dependent on mood, motivation, or reassurance. This is where most people quietly exit, not because they consciously quit, but because they slowly stop showing up with the same intensity. The emotional toll accumulates over time. Doubt doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in small, repeated questions. Am I wasting my time? Should this be easier by now? What if I'm wrong? What if this never works? Each unanswered question adds weight. Without a clear endpoint, the mind begins to look for escape routes. Comfort becomes tempting. Stability starts to feel responsible. Quitting can even be reframed as maturity or realism. The danger is that these narratives often mask fear rather than wisdom. Entrepreneurship demands the ability to act in contradiction to emotion. You move forward while feeling uncertain. You make decisions while feeling unqualified. You invest while feeling scared. This goes against how most people are trained to operate. They wait to feel confident before acting. Entrepreneurs act first and let confidence catch up later. Over time, this rewires their relationship with discomfort. What once felt like a signal to stop becomes background noise. Pain does not disappear, but it loses its authority over behavior. This shift creates a widening gap between those who persist and those who don't. The ones who leave often assume the ones who stayed had some secret insight or advantage. In reality, the difference is tolerance. Tolerance for boredom, tolerance for frustration, tolerance for feeling behind while still moving forward. The compounding effect of this tolerance is massive. Small, imperfect actions taken consistently outperform bursts of motivation that rely on feeling good first. As time passes, something subtle changes. The entrepreneur no longer needs certain to begin or validation to continue. Progress is measured by alignment with effort rather than external results. Decisions become faster because the fear of being wrong loses its grip. Momentum builds not because the path is clear, but because movement itself creates clarity. What once felt like chaos becomes a familiar environment, and familiarity reduces fear. Eventually, the same uncertainty that once caused pain becomes a competitive advantage. While others hesitate, wait, or retreat, the entrepreneur continues. They are no longer asking whether they should keep going. That question has already been answered through action. By the time results become visible to others, the hardest part has already been endured in silence. Built on countless days of showing up without certainty, without encouragement, and without proof that it would ever work, one of the most overlooked realities of entrepreneurship is that results are rarely immediate. And the delay between action and payoff creates a unique form of psychological strain. In most areas of life, effort and reward are closely linked. You study, you get a grade, you train, your body responds, you work, you earn a paycheck. Entrepreneurship, however, operates on delayed compounding. You put in time, energy, and money today, but the reward may arrive months or even years later, if at all. This delayed feedback loop requires a level of patience and discipline that most people have never had to develop, and is precisely what separates those who succeed from those who fail. The difficulty lies in the invisible nature of progress. While effort is tangible, results are often hidden under layers of experimentation, refinement, and iteration. Every decision you make could either move you closer to success or reveal new problems you didn't anticipate. Sometimes you're not even sure which it is until much later. This creates a constant state of ambiguity where you are forced to act without confirmation that the direction you're taking is correct. The mind craves certainty, but entrepreneurship demands operating without it. This gap between effort and outcome is magnified because humans are wired to respond to immediate feedback. Dopamine, the chemical that rewards us for completing tasks, is triggered by visible progress. In entrepreneurship, much of the work feels like preparation rather than accomplishment. The system rewards the patient and punishes the impulsive. You must learn to derive satisfaction from effort itself, from the knowledge that you're building processes, acquiring skills, and learning lessons that will pay off in the future. This shift in mindset is not natural, and it requires constant reinforcement. Moreover, the uncertainty of when results will appear amplifies stress. Every day spent working without visible success feels risk. Every dollar spent feels like a gamble. Every hour invested feels like it might be wasted. Entrepreneurs are constantly balancing the tension between taking action and fearing the unknown. This tension is exhausting because it never fully disappears until the results finally materialize, and even then it only reduces slightly as new challenges and uncertainties emerge immediately. The people who thrive under this delayed system are those who internalize a principle that most overlook the work you do today as an investment, not a guaranteed transaction. The payoff is uncertain, and yet you continue because stopping guarantees failure. While continuing preserves the possibility of success, they measure progress not by immediate wins, but by consistent forward motion, learning, and refinement. The compounding effect of repeated effort eventually overwhelms the uncertainty. producing momentum that becomes increasingly difficult for others to match. Those who fail often misinterpret the lack of immediate results as a signal to quit. They seek shortcuts, validation, or reassurance, failing to recognize that the true barrier is psychological endurance, the capacity to continue acting with imperfect information, to invest in an invisible future, to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty, and to derive meaning from process rather than outcome is the differentiator. It is not talent, timing, or luck alone that produces results. It is a consistent application of effort in the absence of certainty, trusting that the system of compounding will eventually reward the patient and persistent. Entrepreneurship is uniquely challenging because it removes the safety net of predictability. In most areas of life, effort comes with a visible structure and a clear endpoint, and even failure is often contained within known parameters. You take a test, you get a grade, you complete a project, your boss evaluates it. Entrepreneurship offers none of that. The work you do today does not have a guaranteed effect on tomorrow. And there is no externally imposed finish line to signal when the struggle is over. This lack of boundary creates a mental and emotional burden that is unlike anything most people have experienced. The difficulty is amplified because the human brain craves control. We are wired to plan, predict, and anticipate outcomes. Entrepreneurship constantly violates these instincts. Every decision is made with incomplete information. Every step forward is taken with partial clarity. And every action has potential consequences that may not be revealed for months or years. The absence of certainty makes every small choice feel consequential. This magnifies stress because the mind cannot offload responsibility. There is no teacher, manager, or system to validate the path. You're fully accountable not just for results, but for the process itself, and the process is invisible to everyone else, which makes it doubly taxing. This indefinite nature of entrepreneurial work also interacts with human tolerance for pain. Physical pain is bearable when it has an endpoint. A sprint, a set, a race all have defined conclusions. The pain of entrepreneurship is psychological and open-ended. You are asked to persist through uncertainty, to risk resources, and to continue acting without knowing when success will arrive. There is no visible finish line. The brain interprets this as ongoing threat. This creates chronic stress, which can lead to doubt, procrastination, and even avoidance. Many people quit not because they are incapable, but because indefinite discomfort overwhelms their capacity to tolerate it. Another consequence is lack of structure is that momentum is hard to measure. In conventional work, progress is often linear and externally visible. In entrepreneurship, small wins are often invisible, buried within trial and error, skill acquisition, and system development. Days can pass without any tangible proof that effort matters. This invisibility makes perseverance difficult because humans naturally seek immediate reinforcement. The person who continues despite these conditions is not necessarily more talented. They have simply internalized a tolerance for delayed results and invisible progress. What separates successful entrepreneurs from those who fail is the ability to redefine metrics for themselves. They stop looking for external validation or immediate confirmation. Instead, they measure success by effort, consistency, and the ability to keep moving in the absence of certainty. They embrace the open-ended nature of the journey, learning to act despite ambiguity and to persist despite discomfort. The lack of the finish line no longer paralyzes them. It becomes a framework for growth, a system that rewards endurance and resilience over speed or immediate clarity. This mindset is rare because it goes against every instinct humans develop from childhood: the desire for clear instructions, visible feedback, and a predictable endpoint. Those who succeed understand that entrepreneurship is not about controlling the path, but about controlling themselves within uncertainty, and that the absence of a finish line is not a weakness to fix, but the very mechanism that allows extraordinary outcomes to be achieved through patient, relentless effort. One of the most overlooked challenges of entrepreneurship is the constant confrontation with discomfort that has no clear resolution. In most areas of life, discomfort comes with boundaries. Physical pain has a finish line, deadlines have a due date, and effort has measurable outcomes. Entrepreneurship removes all these anchors. You are asked to act, to invest, and to create without knowing whether the results will ever arrive. This type of unbounded discomfort is psychologically exhausting because the brain interprets uncertainty as threat. The body reacts with stress, elevated heart rate, and heightened vigilance, even when there is no immediate danger. The pain of entrepreneurship is not just physical or financial, it is emotional and cognitive. Every decision carries weight, every investment carries risk, and every action exposes vulnerability. The absence of certainty transforms normal work into a prolonged test of endurance. Unlike running a marathon where the finish line is known, entrepreneurship provides no visible markers for when the struggle will end. You are continuously running, continuously acting, and continuously risking without any confirmation that the effort is leading to progress. This creates a persistent state of tension that most people are not equipped to handle. The psychological burden is amplified by the visibility of inaction in others. Watching peers succeed while you feel stuck or invisible triggers comparison, self-doubt, and anxiety. You begin questioning your competence, your strategy, and your worth, even when your actions are rational and consistent. The fact that results are delayed or hidden exacerbates this effect because the mind seeks signals to validate effort, and in entrepreneurship, those signals are often absent for long stretches. It is not just the work that is difficult. It is the constant need to reconcile effort with uncertainty. Another element of this discomfort is the tension between hope and fear. Every action you take is an investment in an unknown future. You're betting on outcomes that may never materialize. Each day, You experience the friction between the belief that your effort will eventually pay off and the fear that it will not. Most people are unwilling to live in that tension indefinitely. They want reassurance, feedback, or a clear signal that they are on the right path. Entrepreneurship gives none of that. It requires moving forward in the absence of certainty and finding internal validation in the act of continuing rather than in the results. What separates those who persist from those who quit is the ability to normalize discomfort. They stop treating tension, frustration, and doubt as problems to solve and instead see them as inherent conditions of the work. They embrace the fact that the process itself will be uncomfortable for a long time and that this discomfort is the price of achieving extraordinary outcomes. By internalizing this principle, they no longer allow temporary emotional spikes to dictate action. They continue to act, iterate, and invest even when it feels painful, understanding that the discomfort is not an indicator of failure, but a constant companion on the path to success. Over time, this tolerance compounds into resilience. Entrepreneurs learn to move forward without external signals, to make decisions under pressure, and to derive satisfaction from mastery rather than validation. The discomfort becomes manageable, even familiar, and the ability to persist through it becomes a competitive advantage, separating those who can endure from those who cannot. Entrepreneurship demands a level of psychological endurance that most people never encounter in other areas of life. And one of the hardest aspects is the persistent confrontation with the unknown. Unlike structured environments where rules, instructions, and timelines provide guidance, entrepreneurship is inherently undefined. You are asked to move forward without clarity, to act without reassurance, and to make decisions without knowing the outcome. Every step is a bet, every choice carries potential consequences, and yet there is no visible scoreboard to confirm whether your efforts are paying off. This constant state of ambiguity creates a unique kind of mental fatigue, one that wears on confidence, motivation, and focus over time. The challenge of operating without a finish line is compounded by the human need for control. The brain is wired to plan, predict, and seek certainty. When these instincts are violated, stress increases, attention narrows, and emotional responses intensify. Entrepreneurship constantly violates these instincts. Every experiment could fail, every launch could underperform, and every investment could be wasted. Unlike other pursuits, the consequences of being wrong are not always immediately visible, which means that anxiety lingers longer. The absence of a defined endpoint transforms ordinary tasks into high-stakes decisions that must be managed psychologically as much as operationally. Another layer of difficulty comes from the invisibility of progress. In most traditional pursuits, effort produces measurable feedback, and even small wins are recognized externally. Entrepreneurship often offers no such signals in the early stages. The systems being built, the relationships being formed, and the skills being developed compound quietly in the background. The person executing the work may feel stagnant or behind because the results are delayed or subtle, creating a sense of frustration and self-doubt. It is easy to interpret this lack of visible outcome as failure, even when meaningful progress is occurring beneath the surface. This psychological strain is intensified by the tension between effort and reward. Every hour spent building, every dollar invested, every risk taken is an emotional and financial commitment to an uncertain future. The mind naturally seeks reassurance, but in entrepreneurship, reassurance is scarce. This lack of validation makes persistence uncomfortable, requiring the individual to find internal motivation in the act of showing up rather than in the results. The ability to decouple effort from immediate reward is a skill that few develop, yet it is essential for surviving the long periods where progress feels invisible. Those who succeed learn to operate within this discomfort. They stop expecting certainty, external validation, or visible results as prerequisites for action. Instead, they focus on movement, learning, and refinement. They accept that progress is often hidden, that failure is part of the process, and that uncertainty is permanent. By reframing the unknown as an environment to navigate rather than a problem to solve, they gain freedom from the mental paralysis that keeps others frozen. Over time, this acceptance allows them to act decisively, iterate quickly, and maintain momentum even in the absence of clarity, which is the core differentiator between those who endure and those who quit. This approach transforms the unknown from a source of fear into a source of leverage. Those who tolerate uncertainty consistently gain an advantage because most people abandon the journey at the first sign of ambiguity. Endurance under uncertainty becomes not only a survival mechanism but a competitive edge, allowing entrepreneurs to execute when others hesitate, to invest when others retreat, and to create outcomes that are impossible for those unwilling to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. One of the harsh aspects of entrepreneurship is simply getting started, because starting means stepping into a space of extreme uncertainty and risk. Most people want success, but few are willing to confront the emotional and psychological challenge of beginning a journey without clear signals of progress. The problem isn't lack of ambition or intelligence, it's fear of the unknown. Before the first action is taken, the mind imagines countless ways things could fail. The first step becomes a mental battlefield filled with self-doubt, imagined consequences, and the weight of responsibility. Most people postpone, plan excessively, or talk about the work because action exposes them to the discomfort they are unprepared to face. Starting is terrifying because it forces a confrontation with personal inadequacy. When you act, you discover how much you don't know. Every skill you thought you had becomes incomplete in the context of real-world application. Every assumption about your market, your strategy, or your capabilities is tested immediately, and usually the first results are imperfect. This revelation is uncomfortable because the brain prefers predictability. Acting without guaranteed success triggers stress responses, doubt, and the temptation to retreat. For many, the risk of confronting their own limitations outweighs the potential reward of taking the first step. Another challenge is that starting requires accepting invisible work. Early progress in entrepreneurship is rarely obvious. Systems, networks, and processes are being built quietly behind the scenes, but they don't produce immediate wins or public validation. This makes the act of beginning feel futile, even when it is absolutely necessary. The human mind struggles to find motivation when effort doesn't produce clear feedback, so the first step often feels disproportionately heavy. The person who eventually begins has to override instinct, fear, and social conditioning to act anyway, trusting that the work will compound over time. Starting also requires embracing failure as an intrinsic part of the process. Every first step carries the risk of miscalculation, rejection, or loss. Most people are conditioned to avoid mistakes because early failures are visible and embarrassing. In entrepreneurship, mistakes are inevitable and critical for learning, but the psychological discomfort they create can paralyze those who haven't yet acted. The key difference is that successful entrepreneurs internalize failure as data rather than judgment. They understand that the first action is never perfect, and that refinement comes through iteration, not waiting for ideal conditions. Ultimately, the ability to start is what separates those who remain dreamers from those who become doers. Ideas, plans, and strategies are meaningless without action, but action requires tolerance for uncertainty, discomfort, and potential failure. The first step is the hardest because it demands courage in the absence of validation, clarity, or structure. It requires the person to act before they feel ready, to invest before outcomes are guaranteed, and to move forward while their mind screams that it is safer to wait. Taking that first step begins a compounding process where small, consistent actions gradually transform risk and uncertainty into experience, knowledge, and momentum, creating the foundation for all subsequent growth and eventual success. One of the most subtle but powerful challenges of entrepreneurship is that many people prefer talking about action rather than taking it. There's a natural comfort in planning, strategizing, and discussing goals because it creates the illusion of progress without the exposure to risk, uncertainty, or failure. Talking provides instant feedback through social validation, praise, or recognition, whereas actual execution requires facing discomfort with no guarantee of reward. This dynamic explains why so many ambitious individuals remain stuck in preparation mode, convincing themselves they are moving forward while the real work remains untouched. When someone talks about scaling, vision, or growth, they get to feel productive. The mind interprets discussion as effort, even though no tangible outcomes are produced. Conversations about plans allow people to demonstrate intelligence, creativity, or ambition to others, reinforcing their identity without demanding sacrifice. The psychological benefit of this is immediate dopamine spikes from recognition, self-esteem is bolstered, and the appearance of progress is maintained. Execution, by contrast, produces delayed feedback, often requires trial and error and exposes weaknesses. The contrast between talking and doing creates a natural temptation to prioritize verbalized effort over actual effort. This dynamic becomes especially pronounced because entrepreneurship is inherently uncomfortable. Every action carries risk, uncertainty, and the potential for failure. For most people, the fear of being wrong or looking incompetent outweighs the motivation to act. Talking about what could be done or will be done provides a safety net. It allows people to engage with ambition while remaining emotionally protected. In effect, discussion becomes a substitute for courage. Planning becomes a substitute for action. And the identity of being an entrepreneur becomes more important than actually building something. The danger in this pattern is that it reinforces inertia. The more time is spent talking rather than doing, the more the brain interprets inaction as normal. The social reward of recognition replaces the delayed reward of results, creating a feedback loop that strengthens avoidance of discomfort. Meanwhile, opportunities continue to pass, progress is delayed, and real experience, the kind that teaches, shapes judgment, and builds competence, remains absent. Those who rely on discussion alone may appear ambitious externally, but internally they are stagnating because nothing is being executed. The people who break free from this cycle understand that talking is not the work. They stop seeking validation from others and focus on movement. They accept that progress is often invisible at first, that failure is inevitable, and that execution carries more psychological weight than planning. They act despite fear, uncertainty, and discomfort, prioritizing momentum over recognition. Over time, the compounding effect of consistent execution separates those who talk from those who achieve. In entrepreneurship, results are not awarded for ideas or words. They are earned through relentless action, iteration, and commitment, and the willingness to do what most people only discuss is the defining factor that distinguishes success from stagnation. Entrepreneurship is difficult because it forces people to confront the uncomfortable truth that effort alone does not guarantee reward. Most people grow up believing that hard work automatically produces results, that showing up, trying, and investing energy will lead to success. In entrepreneurship, this expectation is shattered. You can work tirelessly, dedicate all your time and energy, and still see no visible outcome for months or even years. This disconnect between effort and reward creates a psychological tension that most people are not prepared to endure, and it is at the heart of why so many aspiring entrepreneurs give up before real results appear. The challenge begins with the emotional cost of investment. Time, money, and effort are finite resources, and putting them into something uncertain triggers internal resistance. Every decision feels high stakes because the cost of being wrong is tangible. Unlike conventional work where errors are often absorbed by a system or a supervisor, in entrepreneurship, mistakes are personal, visible, and often expensive. This amplifies the natural fear of failure and creates a mental drag that makes continuing difficult. The human brain, wired to avoid pain and risk, interprets delayed or uncertain reward as evidence that the effort is not worth it. Another factor is the compounding invisibility of progress. Entrepreneurship is rarely linear. Early wins are small, hidden, or delayed, and the work often looks like spinning in place to outsiders and even to the entrepreneur themselves. Systems are being built, networks are being formed, and skills are being acquired quietly, but the payoff is intangible in the moment. Humans are wired to respond to feedback, and when the feedback is absent, motivation falters. Most people give up not because they fail, but because the brain interprets delayed results as failure, creating a self-fulfilling cycle of abandonment. This disconnect also fuels the allure of talking instead of doing. Discussing goals, strategies, and future outcomes provides immediate psychological reward without requiring exposure to risk. People feel productive, recognized, and intelligent, even though no tangible progress is occurring. In contrast, taking action forces confrontation with uncertainty, potential failure, and the discomfort of invisible progress. Execution demands courage, persistence, and patience, qualities that are often underdeveloped because society rarely rewards long periods of unvalidated effort. Entrepreneurs who succeed internalize a critical mindset shift. They learn to decouple effort from immediate reward. They accept that work may produce nothing visible for long stretches, but that each step is an investment in a future that may compound into massive results. They learn to derive satisfaction from mastery, learning, and movement rather than from applause or validation. By redefining what counts as progress, they can maintain consistency, resilience, and motivation even when the scoreboard remains blank. Ultimately, the difficulty of entrepreneurship is not the work itself, but the emotional endurance required to act without guarantees. Those who persevere understand that effort without reward is not wasted. It is a necessary condition of compounding success. The willingness to continue acting, investing, and risking while remaining unvalidated separates those who achieve extraordinary outcomes from those who never leave the starting line. Entrepreneurship is difficult because the ability to endure uncertainty, pain, and frustration over long periods is far more important than intelligence, talent, or ideas. Most people believe success comes from having a brilliant plan, a clever strategy, or innate skill. But in reality, what separates those who succeed from those who fail is psychological resilience, the capacity to keep acting when the path is unclear and results are delayed. Entrepreneurship constantly tests this capacity because the environment is unpredictable. Progress is often invisible, and the risks of loss are real and immediate. The challenge is not executing tasks, it is sustaining belief, energy, and action when nothing external confirms that the effort is meaningful. The human mind is naturally wired to seek certainty, and entrepreneurship deliberately violates this instinct. Every choice, every step forward carries risk and the outcomes are unknown, unlike structured work environments where effort yields predictable feedback. Entrepreneurship demands that individuals act without knowing whether their actions will succeed or fail. This generates a persistent cognitive and emotional load as the mind constantly evaluates options, anticipates failure, and imagines potential losses. Over time, this weight accumulates, producing fatigue, doubt, and hesitation. The entrepreneur's ability to tolerate the psychological strain is what allows them to continue while most others stop prematurely. Another factor is the delayed and often invisible nature of progress. Early stages of entrepreneurial work rarely produce immediate wins. Skills are developed slowly, systems are built incrementally, and results often manifest long after the initial effort. For someone untrained in delayed gratification, this invisibility can feel like stagnation, creating frustration and temptation to quit. The mind seeks reinforcement, but in entrepreneurship, reinforcement comes later, if at all. The successful entrepreneur learns to derive satisfaction from action itself, internalizing the understanding that consistent effort compounds over time and that each small step, though unseen, contributes to eventual success. Frustration and discomfort are constant companions in the entrepreneurial journey. Every failure, setback, or unexpected obstacle triggers emotional and cognitive stress. Unlike other endeavors, where failure is contained and short-lived, entrepreneurial challenges persist and often cascade. The individual must continue acting despite this friction, maintaining clarity, focus, and energy while navigating unknown variables. The psychological requirement is extreme, acting effectively under emotional strain, continuing without external validation, and tolerating prolonged uncertainty while staying committed to long-term goals. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail is not the avoidance of difficulty, but the management of it. Entrepreneurs who endure understand that discomfort is inevitable, and that persistence in its presence is a competitive advantage. They no longer interpret stress, doubt, or frustration as signals to stop. Instead, they accept these states as part of the process, using them as indicators that they are moving forward. By consistently acting in spite of uncertainty and discomfort, they accumulate momentum that eventually transforms risk into opportunity and effort into tangible results. Endurance under uncertainty, the ability to act without validation, and the capacity to persist through frustration and pain become the defining factors in entrepreneurship. Talent, intelligence, and ideas are insufficient without the psychological resilience to navigate the invisible, delayed, and unpredictable nature of the journey. Those who master this endurance develop a compounding advantage, separating themselves from the vast majority who are unwilling or unable to tolerate the mental and emotional strain required to see their ambitions realized. Entrepreneurship is not hard because you're doing something wrong. It's hard because you're doing something that most people cannot tolerate. The uncertainty, the delay, the invisible progress, the discomfort, and the loneliness are not flaws in the process. They are the filter. They exist to separate those who want the result from those who are willing to pay the price. If you can keep showing up without reassurance, keep moving without clarity, and keep investing when the payoff is unknown, you don't need to be Spissel lucky or gifted. You just need to endure longer than everyone else, because in this game, the ones who win are not the smartest or the loudest, but the ones who refuse to stop when quitting would feel justified.